Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. On today's show, I met this young man, a friend of a friend. And a lot of times when you meet a friend of a friend, there's not as much of a connection. But right away, when I got on the phone with this guy, we actually got a chance to be able to Zoom together. And it was incredible to be able to see, not only is he the top in his industry, but he's also wanting to give back to everybody else. There's very few people in the world that I believe that experience success and then want to turn around and help other people to be able to achieve even more success than they've even had. And I think that it's amazing. I think it's admirable. This man is the CEO and founder of Guestio.com, which we're going to talk about later, and the Build Your Network podcast, which is one of the top 25 business podcasts in the world. So welcome to the show, Mr. Travis Chappell.
Hey, what's up, Kelly? Thanks so much for having me, man.
So good to see you, man. Why do you want to give back? Why is that so important to you? Because most of the time people would just take the bag and run.
Yeah, dude. I mean, what are we here for? You know, what are we here for? What are we here for in life, if not to give back and help other people around us? You know, and I think that the people who have filled up their cup are the people that are most poised to be able to help people around them. Even though a lot of people have kind of like altruistic goals, thoughts, or tendencies, but I think altruism in its purest form is taking care of yourself and your family first before you go do a lot of the things that you want to do. But impact and legacy, I mean, is a huge part of, I think, why we're all here, is to continue improving the lives of like ourselves and our family, but also everybody around us as much as we can spread that sphere of influence out. You know, I think we have a responsibility to do that.
Now, I would like to think that you're just a superhero, right? That those kind of principles just came to you, and you're just this being from another planet. But I would venture to say that had a little something to do with your environment, your upbringing. Where did this come from? Was this something that your parents taught you from an early age? Was it aunts, uncles? Did you have a mentor early that helped you to realize that? Because I mean, us on our own, a lot of times we can't succeed.
No, I mean, the environment that I grew up in was really just strictly religious, like a fundamental Christianity group. And so I think that was kind of always just bred inside of me, the kind of give back thing, because that was basically all I did up to my, early 20s, was just giving, volunteering and doing work for free and all that kind of stuff. And, interning and just always serving, giving back or whatever. And that was kind of like my MO at that point. So I think that was just kind of like my environment created that inside of me growing up. And then to a certain extent, when I kind of had the realization that I wasn't poised to help people as much as I could be because I had never helped myself, I think I didn't necessarily abandon it completely for a while, but the modes through which I help people became different, and it started being a little bit more strict on who I gave energy to, and trying to start helping people who were actually willing to help themselves as well, and being a little bit more picky on my time and my energy and things like that, and then was able to kind of build a little bit more, I guess, abundance in my own life before, stepping back into trying to make sure that you're always helping somebody else up.
So how is it? I was just talking with one of my buddies. His name is Ellis. Just this morning, we were talking about this. He grew up in a very strict kind of, I wouldn't say fundamental, but it was a very strict household, very religious, he said to me. And we had the discussion that a lot of times that turns more people away from it than brings them to it. Was this the case with you? Was there, kind of resentment towards it? Or was it something that you just said, hey, I love this part, I'm just going to continue on with it?
Yeah, it's a good question, dude.
Travis,
I think that
Travis, if you don't know, I've got good questions, man.
There's one right there. I'll keep it tally. Yeah, I remember seeing people that left the world that I grew up in when I was kind of still in it, and I would see this extreme reaction, this that's just fueled by bitterness and grief almost, and it's a form of trauma essentially, and they were not adept enough to be able to work through that trauma and see any sort of positivity come out of it. And so they gave in to the negativity, and I always saw that as an example. And obviously, when I was in it, I never thought I was going to leave it. When you're in something, you don't think you're going to leave it. But when I did leave it, I made a point in my life to just kind of not be the person that left and was bitter and talked crap about it and looked at all the bad things about it. I really just tried to focus on all the good things that came out of it. And because I think everybody's childhood's that way, man. I think there's pros and cons to the way that every single person was raised, way that they were parented, the way that their schools were, education was. Like, I'm sure there's pros and cons to everything. Even the most privileged among us, there's got to be a ton of cons in that column that most people don't even think about or are aware of. Um, and then all the way down to the most poverty stricken and abuse ridden people. Like, there's pros and cons to the way that everybody was raised. And I chose, frankly, just simply to look at the things that were good about it and tried not to get bitter about all the things that were bad about it. And I think that's served me in life, because there's something about bitterness, man, that, like, it only affects the person that's actually being bitter. It doesn't do anything to the people that you're bitter at. It only makes you miserable. It only makes you have excuses as to why you're not successful. It only makes you live in a place of scarcity, and only makes you continue to be miserable and not live the version of life that you're called to live. And, like, why? Like, it doesn't make sense as a way to move forward in life. So I just never really gave it much thought.
So, Travis, what were some of the cons when you were a kid that now you see as pros? And I'll give you an example. Right in front of me, I have a notebook, right? This, if you look at this artwork, you would think that I was Picasso, right? You see this bad boy, and you probably remember this. I don't know if you remember this, Travis, because you're a lot younger than me. But this is called a spiral notebook for all you kids out there that are watching. And we used to do a thing called writing on paper. And I'm gonna open this up here, Travis, and I'm gonna show you, and you can see the numbers. Let's see, it'll go that way. I'm backwards, so you can see the numbers. You see the numbers on the top there, Travis?
Yeah.
What does this say?
225.06.
86.
86. Okay, got
So
it.
these are my notes from when I was 11 years old. Actually, 10 years old. I used to have to take 10 pages of notes before I went out to play every single day, and we had to do it on a millionaire course that was a personal development. And me and my brother had to do this for two years. We also had to sleep teach. These were things that, as a kid, I thought were a con in my life, because my dad was very strict. He was like, I had to sleep teach, which means that I had a headphone in my pillow for 8 to 10 hours a night listening to millionaire tapes. And I had to listen to this for 2 solid years, 7 days a week. It's 7,000 hours that I had to put in.
Wow.
And I was mad about it. I'm super happy about it now. It's a pro in my life because I built my whole business on the principles that are in this book that I wrote when I was 11 years old.
Wow.
So what were some of the cons that when you were a kid, you were growing up like, Pop, let me do X, and you couldn't do it. Now you look at it and you're like, that's what set me up for the type of success, to have the top 25 business podcast in the world, to be helping people all over the world and doing what it is that you're doing. What were some of those cons that now you see as pros?
That's a good question as well, dude. Cause I like things like that I was kind of forced to do. At the time, I felt like I knew why I was doing some of those things, except for some of the traditional stuff, like, school or homework or whatever. But even then, like, I was always driven, motivated. I was competitive as hell. So I just worked hard at those things. And I think that the one thing that I think maybe that I hated at the time, and that I still don't enjoy, which is why perhaps why I don't enjoy it now, is like manual labor and working hard like that in that way. We had a couple acres growing up, and on the weekends, like my dad was always one of those guys that enjoyed the manual labor thing, like because he was a realtor, and so the most of his week was spent in an office and on phone calls and stuff. And so he enjoyed getting out in the yard on Saturday and Sunday and doing yard work all day. It was relaxing, or fulfilling, at least to him, to see the get that feeling of accomplishment after a hard day's work and whatever. And I can certainly understand that. But at the time growing up, it sucked because I didn't want to use my weekends to work in the yard and like mow the lawn and pull weeds and, you know what I mean? Rake and break up root systems with a breaker bar. Like I didn't want to dig holes. I didn't want to do any of that stuff for my weekends. I wanted to enjoy my weekend, you know? Especially because, like I said, we were really religious. So Sunday was pretty much like we were up early going to church. We had Sunday school, and then we had Sunday morning service, and then we had Sunday evening service. So we would like wake up early Sunday, go to Sunday school, go to Sunday morning service, come back home, eat lunch, go work in the yard, and then go back to, and then like go, and then go get showered, get changed and dressed, and go back to church on Sunday night, and then come back and then school on Monday. You know what I mean? So like my only real day of, you know, weekend activity was Saturday. And a lot of times we'd spend that working too. So I definitely hated that at the time. But it also, I think, taught me the value of a hard day's work, taught me how to put in hours of work at a really young age. And it gave me, you know, at least some skill sets that I was able to use and monetize a little bit later on and start making some money, you know? So like if I would say that I grew up like almost essentially in poverty, like in elementary, like when I was really young, when my dad was still kind of finding his way and what he was going to do. But then by the time I was like junior high, high school, they had afforded a really good middle lifestyle. Like my dad was making 6 figures as a real estate agent, and basically all of our immediate needs were taken care of. But if I wanted something above and beyond that, I had to pay for it. Or like if I broke something when I was playing with my friends or something, like I had to pay for it, you know? So like there was a lot of responsibility in those areas. And so if I had to go pay for something, I would go out in the yard and I would do yard work, and my parents would pay me hourly and I would get the money. But then when they would pay me the money, they forced me, we had these little banks, a little piggy bank, and it had a church, it had a store, and it had a bank. And so 10% of everything that I got went into the little church side of the piggy bank. 20% of everything I got went into the little bank side of the piggy bank. And then everything else got to go in the store, which is what I got to spend. And so like there were things like that where at the time, you know, it was like, I don't get to spend all my money, and I don't just get money, and I have to go work in the yard, and I don't want to spend my weekends doing this. But, you know, in retrospect, what ended up happening is that store money or the bank money that got put in the bank, whenever it would fill up, my parents would take it out and go put it in an actual bank account, in a mutual fund account. And so by the time I was graduating high school, my sister and I both had like 10 grand in our mutual fund savings accounts. And we used that to buy a duplex together. And it was like our first investment property at 18 years old, because we were working in the yard and saving up money and putting it into work for us, and like understanding these like little principles like that. So, you know, at the time I don't remember like being bitter about having to save money, but I definitely remember being very bitter about having to work and do manual labor, which I think like at the time I was like, I loved playing basketball growing up. So like my childhood dream was like playing in the NBA or whatever, you know, so it's like, I'm just going to go play in the NBA and pay people to do my yard work or whatever. And obviously that path didn't end up working out, but I think that might be a contributor to why I have a high drive to make sure that I have enough money to be able to not have to do the things that I don't want to do, because I don't like doing things that I don't like doing, you know.
So you see, it's amazing to hear it, because I mean your attitude about the stuff is phenomenal. Right. And so I want to go into that. Help us and take us to Travis as a kid going to church. You're going in the morning, you're going at night, you're working in between. I want to one up you, because my dad made us go on Wednesday nights too.
We had that too. We had
did.
Wednesday
okay.
nights.
So you win. And my dad wanted
we had chapel at school.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So that was at elementary, high school, college. We had chapel during school, which is like another church service. And then on Saturdays we had soul winning. So soul winning is where you go out and invite other people to come to church. And then before you go soul winning, you have a soul winning rally, which is like a half-hour service again before you go out soul winning. So there was multiple opportunities. We had missions conferences and leadership conferences where they would have church Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. I don't even know, dude. It's got to be thousands of times that I went to church growing up. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, but this diverts me. I'll come back to my question, but I always see a correlation between when you're doing what were you saying, the on the Saturday where you're trying to get other people to come? What was it called?
Soul winning.
Soul winning. So I watch different sects and different beliefs systems that will do soul winning. You know, some people will do door knocking, whatever it is, and I watch the percentage of their success later on in life is so much higher than people who didn't knock on doors. I've seen it as they're okay with hearing no because they heard no a lot from a lot of people they knocked on the door. How much of an advantage did that give you trying to go out and do soul winning when you're in business now and you're hearing no a lot?
Yeah, it's interesting because we did soul winning, which is it's essentially it's door knocking. You're just inviting people to come to church and giving them tracts and then trying to obviously like witness to them on their doorstep and lead people to the Lord or whatever. Um, what was interesting is in college there was a door to door company that started recruiting out of our college, which is how I got into door to door, and I did door to door sales for about 5 years, 6 years
Mm-hmm.
after that. But what was interesting to me is that all of my friends grew up the same way that I grew up. But when that door to door company started recruiting people, I I kind of like rose to the top of the pack for some reason. And so it's a good question because I've tried to give it some thought myself because all of my friends were doing the soul winning thing just as much as I was, you know what I mean? So it was like, well, why, how come like that can't be the only advantage? I have to assume that it helped at least in some way in terms of like my brazen attitude of coming up to a door and being willing to try it out and move on to the next door. Like there could be maybe something there. But in terms of the actual like success rate that I ended up having on door to door and then eventually in multiple aspects of sales, I don't know I don't know that there's a direct correlation with that specifically, because I think a lot more of my friends would have also been just as good at it if that were the only factor. So I really don't know. I really don't know. I can't think that it didn't help, that's for sure. But I don't know exactly like how much it did or what it impacted. You know what I mean?
Well, it'd be interesting to look at because you look at your attitude towards it, right? Because a lot of times people's attitude towards it is like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and knock the door because I was told to do it. But it seems like your attitude was in a place where you were understanding that I'm doing these hard things because I'm going to move through them. And then you're going to be able to learn the lesson during it. And
Yeah.
again, I just watch it and I watch people who started off in the, in a religious belief system that, whether they went on a mission or they were passing out tracts or whatever it was. And I
Yep.
look at them and again, the ability to hear no and press through, like how much of that, I mean, is that something that you have to work with and deal with today and in what you're doing now with Guestio?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can ever escape that. If you want any sort of disproportionate success in life, meaning that you want to go out and create more than you were born to have, you're going to face rejection a lot along the way, no matter what it is. And so I think that one thing can set you up for success in a lot of ways. It's funny. There's a really popular podcast called How I Built This by Guy Raz. And it's an NPR podcast and gets, I don't know, hundreds of millions of downloads or something like that. And the dude interviews all the best people in Silicon Valley, like people that are running $10 billion companies, and gives their kind of startup, founder story, how I built this. And he wrote a book called How I Built This that was like his findings after interviewing all these crazy successful people. And when he did his book tour on that, I listened to him on probably 5 or 6 different podcast interviews that he did while he's promoting the book. And almost everybody asked him this question. And maybe it was kind of his PR team making sure that people asked the question, but the question was like, you've interviewed all these people, what's the common denominator? What makes people successful? And the one answer that he gave across multiple interviews, which is how I know that he actually believes it, because it wasn't just one that I heard him on. He said, every successful founder that I've talked to has learned how to overcome or deal with rejection. That's like the core common denominator, because it's always going to be there. And the bottom line is, bro, is that most people give up without enough data. They think that they collected data. They think that they knocked on enough doors, but at the end of the day, they didn't. And you don't know what happens on door 200 if you quit at door 25, and not just in door to door. I'm saying like as a metaphor and whatever it is that you're trying to do. If it's a phone call, if it's a sales call, if it's a mastermind group, if it's an event, people that you're shaking hands with, potential prospects for your company. Maybe the offer's wrong. Maybe you have to learn a little bit more from the market that you're talking to. You have to tweak it a little bit. Like, people just don't stick in it long enough because they don't have the tolerance to overcome all of the votes against what they're doing. Because that's really what it is. Rejection is just a vote against you. Whereas like confidence is a vote for you. And so if you don't do enough internal work on your confidence, then every time someone rejects you, you're taking a little bit out of your confidence bank. And if you're overdrawn on your confidence account, it's only a matter of time before you give up. So you have to like constantly be battling that and learning how to make deposits into that confidence account consistently enough to make sure that you're not overdrawn on all the rejection that you face.
Travis, where are you adding to your confidence account? Like what are you drawing on?
Yeah. So there's a few different ways to do it. One way would be training.
Well, I'm saying like you specifically, like, because there's going to be that part as far as the training part, but what do you do that, kind of almost sets you apart?
The number one way to build your self-confidence, and the number one way that I view building my self-confidence, is to have an impeccable relationship with yourself. That's the number one thing, by far, meaning you have to keep the promises that you make to yourself. If you have an issue with confidence, it's probably because you subconsciously don't even like yourself. And so when you're putting yourself out there to other people, you're communicating your lack of desire to do business with you to them. People pick up on that kind of stuff. There's something called the 738-55 rule, which says that only 7% of communication is the words that we say. 38% is tonality, 55% is body language. If you're not purposeful about your tonality and body language, then your tonality and body language is screaming at people to not do business with you because subconsciously you don't even like yourself. You don't even trust yourself. If you don't trust you to do the things that you said you would do, how can you properly portray to somebody else that they can trust you to do the things that you say that you're going to do? And that's all sales is. All sales is getting somebody else to trust that you're going to deliver on the problem that you say that you can solve for them. So if you can't articulate that to them and they can't believe that you truly believe that, how are you going to start selling stuff? It's a matter of your inner confidence and the relationship that you have with you. If you have an impeccable relationship with yourself, rejection's not really going to matter to you. Because you're just going to go, whatever, that person didn't like it, but the next person will, because I know this is awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like the rejection doesn't hurt you near as much if you're fully confident in yourself. Now, I don't know if anybody's 100% fully confident in himself, except for maybe narcissists or sociopaths. Like everybody doubts themselves. Everybody has, moments. Everybody has got that imposter syndrome, that's boiling up every once in a while. But that's what I'm saying is you have to continue to make more deposits into your self-confidence than you make withdrawals in your self-confidence, which is why I'm so adamant about staying in the gym every day, which is why I'm so adamant about like going to events and conferences, and why I'm so adamant about continuously learning myself, paying for mentorship or coaches or reading books, listening to audiobooks, because every time I'm doing one of those things, I'm depositing something in my confidence account so that the next time I get rejected, it's like, whatever, the next person's going to say yes. You know what I mean? Like the rejection hurts you, but that's just a symptom. The actual problem is your lack of self-confidence, and you have to do something to address your lack of self-confidence if you have any intention of being able to overcome rejection on a consistent basis in the future.
When did you become aware of that, and who gave you the permission to work on it?
That one insight was actually from an interview that I did with Ed Milet. I don't know if you know Ed.
Of course.
But he was like the first person that articulated it that simply to me. I had kind of like put together some thoughts myself on what you could do to build self-confidence. And a lot of it was about being consistent and putting in reps And for me, one of the big things is doing the things that other people aren't willing to do. That's a big self-confidence. Always a big deposit of my self-confidence for me is when I know that I'm doing something that most people aren't willing to do. When you put in the one more rep, or you get up at 4 a.m. to make sure you get your workout in, like to do the things that people, like if other people aren't willing to do, to me, that's a big deposit of my confidence bank. Cause I know that those things add up over time, and over time, people aren't going to be able to catch up with me because that's compounded over such a long period of time. And so like, I had some like things that I knew helped me, but when I heard Ed put it that way, where he was like, the number one thing is to have an impeccable relationship with you. And it was just like, that makes total sense. Cause if you play it out to conclusion, like we said, if you're 100% confident in you and you believe that what you're selling or what you're doing is that awesome, then it doesn't matter who's telling you that what you're doing isn't awesome. That doesn't affect your belief in what you're doing if you're fully confident in it. And like I said, I don't know if you can ever become fully confident in it, but like to get close to that is kind of the goal, because then at that point you can move forward without the fear that riddles most people. You can move forward without the anxiety of, I wonder how I'm going to pay my bills if I attack this venture. You can move forward without any of those things because you know it's awesome, and it's only a matter of time before other people start picking up on how awesome it is. You know what I mean? Like it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And that's what keeps most people out of the game, is they leave it to an if. If this takes off, then I'll give it all I got. If this happens to it blow up, then I'll really give it more time and attention. It's not a when for most people, it's an if. And that's because they don't have the confidence behind the thing that they're pushing or promoting to do it shamelessly, to push it beyond what they think is possible, because they don't think it's possible themselves. So if you don't think it's possible, how are you going to go convince a bunch of other people that it's possible? It just doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
Well, how and when does it go from technique? Because I mean, you scour the internet, even scouring podcasts, scouring audiobooks, there's techniques for every single thing. And when does it go from technique to a person owning it? A difference between a person renting it and a person owning it. It's the same thing. You live in Vegas, Travis. You know exactly what I'm talking about. There is I'm going out in Vegas starter kit that generally used to have Ed Hardy and used to have all the chains and the bangles and all the things and the fish on your shirt. And that was if I walk out with this, everything's going to be cool. When does it go from technique to actual belief, and as opposed to renting and owning that information? Because you own it, but how can a person go into that place?
I think it's just a matter of time. There's no pill that you can take to just get confidence, or you know what I mean? Like it's just going to take consistent work over a period of time and a lot of small wins. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I've never really heard it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. I need to start working on building my own confidence. Then come up with a couple of things that you can implement today or tomorrow that are going to help you keep that promise you made to yourself. Something that's a little bit difficult for you that maybe you haven't done before. You know, if you're used to drinking every day, just be like, you know what, I'm not going to drink for 3 days. 3 days. Give yourself 3 days and see how it feels after you get to day 3. Because day 1, you're going to be like, this was a stupid idea. You know, day 2, you're going to be like, wait, why did I do this? And then day 3, when you're having trouble sleeping, it's like, I mean, it's only one more day, you know. But then if you get to day 4 and you make it happen and you look at it, that drink that you take on day 4 is going to be a really, really good drink. You know what I mean? Like if you say you're going to get up at a certain time, get up at that time. Don't, like, people are so willy-nilly with their promises, with their commitments, with their like New Year's resolutions or whatever it is that they're trying to do. They're so I say willy-nilly. They're just, there's no meat to their promises because they never keep them. They have this imminent distrust in their ability to come through on anything that they say that they're going to do. And so start with something small. This week, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. Okay, you better get up at 5 a.m. this week, every day, no matter what. Even if it means you take a 2-hour nap in the afternoon because you're just so damn tired. I don't care. Get your ass out of bed at 5 a.m. Do the thing that you said you were going to do. Start something small. Read a book, like finish a book, an entire book all the way through, you know, like a chapter a day until I finish this book, no matter what. even if it means I'm sitting in bed reading at 11:43 p.m. and my eyes are closing because I got up at 5 a.m. and I'm reading this book. Just do it for 3 days, 5 days, 1 week. Do something that you haven't done before that might be a little bit difficult just because you know that it's probably good for you. Commit to something and follow through on it and watch what happens at the end of that time. Like if you say you're going to get up, if you're used to getting up at 9, 8, like trust me, bro, like I growing up, I hated reading. Like it was a running joke in my family. Nobody got me books because I hated reading. I slept in all the time. I was an avid sleeper. I'm somebody that needs my 8 hours. Or I just get exhausted and I get crabby and grumpy. And so I always slept in, and I would sleep in till, in high school and college, well, I mean, in college, I was getting up super early to go to classes, but like in the summertime in high school, in the summertime in college, when I didn't have classes, sleep in till 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, because I was up late the night before. Now I read books, I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts, and I'm up 4:30 most days. Like it's not a matter of like, oh, well, I'm just not that person. It's just a matter of, is this good for me? If the answer is yes, can I convince myself to do it? You know what I mean? So like if you're sleeping in all the time and you're like, I know that I could get some more stuff done if I just got up a little bit earlier, then commit 6 o'clock. I'm gonna get up at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever it is, whatever's difficult for you, commit to that and say 7 days. It's going to be really hard, and you're going to really want to snooze your alarm clock. Don't put your phone or your snooze button next to your face when you're sleeping, by the way. Put it somewhere else so you have to get up out of bed to go turn it off, right? But anyway, make it a little bit easier for yourself, but get up and do the thing. And when you're done on day 8, bro, you're just going to feel like you'll get what I mean when I say it's a deposit in your confidence account. You go, man, I did that. I wonder what else in my life that I've told myself I can't do. I wonder what else that I really can do. Let's try something else. I'm going to go without sugar this month. Whatever it is, dude, like it doesn't even have to be directly related to your business. I'm just saying you got to make little deposits into your confidence account on purpose, or rejection's going to kill you.
So a thing that I want to discuss, I've actually never got a chance to discuss this, but it's a question that I've always had. Tim Grover, who you're familiar with, he talks about the dark side of, of elite performers. And I want to talk to me about the dark side of this part, because when we add marriage to this, and we're extremely driven people, we find out about techniques on how to be able to drive, things like this. Our wives can sniff this out in a second if we're techniquing them, if we're selling them, and they want us to be present. How does this apply in a marriage? And how have you successfully been able to utilize it in your marriage?
The thing about building confidence and stuff.
Well, I mean, when you were talking about like, say technique driven, right? So you use a technique until you fall in love with it. You start to see the results. And then when you see the results, then you reward yourself and you continue to go, right? Of what you were talking about. How does that apply in a marriage? Because when we add a woman to the part, and the reason why I say this is because for myself in business was never a challenge going after something. It was believing it, like you said, believing it, having the attitude, walking in. But then there was my wife that came into the fold about 16 years ago when we started dating. And I remember trying to use technique on her. And she was like, I will punch you in the throat right now. And then you're going to take out the trash that I already asked you to do before you try and use all this hoobie-doobie on me that you learned at a convention. How are you able to, because if you notice in the personal development realm too, and this is probably not a popular opinion, but it's not even an opinion, it's a fact. I watch, and a lot of times I see guys there, and then most of the guys that I sit and talk with tell me that they're having challenges in their marriage because they're growing and their wife isn't growing at the same rate. But they're not taking the time to realize that these techniques won't work in a marriage.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really difficult to navigate, dude, because there's really, in my opinion, there's really nothing that you can do. It has to be an internal fire that's lit inside of the spouse, regardless of, if it's your husband, your wife, whatever it is, whoever in the relationship is not focused on growth. There's becomes like a bottleneck or like a weight almost, where you feel like you're moving up, and then this person's staying the same. And it's like, oh, you can only move up so far when you have a weight strapped to your chest. And so it's a really, really difficult situation to navigate, dude, because like you have to make some decisions, and you got to be able to, you got to ask yourself some questions, and ask yourself how long you're okay with doing this before they kind of catch the fire inside of their own selves to start making their own changes. Cause that's the only way it's going to happen. It's like when I was growing up, I was super fit. I was playing basketball all the time. In college, I'm about 6'1". I was like 6'1", 190, 195, like good weight, in shape. And then I got married, and and then I started drinking beer for the first time when I was like 22. And I went on this, like, because I'd been told what to do my whole life, I went on this year after like I was married and out of college where I just did whatever I wanted. I ate whatever I wanted. My habits were poor. I gained 40 pounds in like a year. I got up to 250 pounds. And the only thing that made me lose weight was my own internal desire to begin losing weight. Anybody that told me up to that point, like, oh, kind of putting on some pounds there, Travis, or like, hey, you're getting a little fat, or whatever, like the snide comments people would make, never worked. Never worked. It only made me like double down on what I was doing. It was just like, I do what I want, and that's my thing. You know what I mean? The only thing that made me change was an internal desire to change. Where did it come from? I mean, I don't know where it's going to come from for everybody, but for me, it was just like, I didn't want to tell the story of my life and be the out of shape guy with a lot of money. It just never, I didn't want to be that. And I was like, I'm gonna have to make a change immediately in my habits and stuff. And it's been a journey ever since then. The point in me bringing that up is like, you're not going to be able to your point, finesse or finagle your spouse into trying to change themselves or start growing or start jumping into personal development. I tried to do that for a little bit when I first started getting into it because my wife wasn't really in the same world at all. And it wasn't until like we had like a kind of a big tragic moment in our marriage until we really addressed those things, where it became this thing of like where we almost ended up splitting up because we were just becoming completely different people, and we were just not on the same page in life. And a lot of it was my fault. And so like a lot of times you got to sit down and take responsibility for the things that you're contributing to the situation, and then ask yourself how long you're willing to wait for them to kind of not catch up. Cause I don't want to imply that they're like not as good as you. It's just that if you're not on the same page, you're not on the same page. It's going to be really difficult to live a life together with two people that aren't on the same page. And so for me, it was like a couple years into it where we ended up almost splitting up. And then that kind of like forced my wife to have almost like a back against the wall moment where she started discovering things for herself in her own way without it. Like the whole time I was trying to like, oh, listen to this podcast, or you should read this book or whatever. And she would be like, okay. And then she would never do it because she didn't have the internal desire to do it. She was only doing it because like I told her that it was good. And so even if she did do it, like she wouldn't really get much from it, and nothing would really change because it wasn't fueled by a desire to change. It was fueled by, I should do this to get Travis off my back. You know what I mean? So, at some point, like if this is going on for years and years and you've been doing this for a decade, at some point you got to ask yourself the question, like, are we ever going to be on the same page? Is it better for us not to try to do this together anymore? Frankly, because like I don't know, I might be ruffling some feathers with that, but I don't think that people should stick together if they're not aligned in their goals, because one person's going to end up resenting the other person. Either the person that's like got these big goals and dreams and they're pushing for these big goals and dreams, and then they have a spouse that's holding them back and not letting them do anything. And anytime they invest in themselves or they jump into a mastermind or they buy a course, it's like, how dare you? We're barely scraping by. We can't pay our bills and you're spending this money on this other thing. And it's like this cantankerous, bitter thing. So that person just like stops doing the things that they feel called to do. And they stop going after their goals and dreams, and they settle because that's what their spouse wants them to do. And then fast forward the clock in 30 years and they are beyond the point of being able to do anything about their dreams and goals. I think that leads to pure resentment of the other person, and vice versa. If this person's like, I want to go achieve all these things, but this person's like, that's not the life that I care to live. Like, I don't need all that. If we just have a roof over our heads and we have our family and we're going to soccer games on the weekends, that's a great life for me. But this person's like, yeah, but I'm going to miss all those soccer games because I'm at work. You know what I mean? Like I'm hustling and I'm driven and I'm on sales calls on a Sunday afternoon, even though you want to be like Netflix and chilling. You know what I mean? Neither, like my point is neither path is wrong, but if you're not aligned, whichever party ends up winning in the relationship is going to be like the opposite party is going to resent that winning party. So this person drives and pushes and drives and pushes. This is when you get the person that like now you have a $25 million net worth and you're 40 years old, but now you're getting a divorce because your wife never wanted that. She didn't need to be worth $25 million. She just wanted 75,000 a year, just enough to be able to have a decent place to live and be able to spend time with their kids. And that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like one party's going to resent the other party if you're not both on the same page. So at some point you have to have a really, really, really difficult, honest, open conversation to say, I don't think we're on the same page. And I want to know that if we're going to keep doing this, we're going to be on the same page. And that's really, really difficult to do. And again, I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not a marriage advisor. I'm just saying what worked in our marriage was just like, we just have a policy of being painfully honest.
Yeah.
Even if you know that it's going to hurt the other person, you have to be honest or else it's going to end up in resentment. And that's not a way that I want to live my life, especially not the way that I want to have a marriage.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly why we created the Hideout. I mean, the Hideout is something because every person that I'm around now, the part that I want to interject on is when you were talking about like you get to a point and say the person is performing and they say, hey, you're not aligned with my goals, I'm going to move on. I would say probably 95% of the guys that I know that were in that situation that moved on ended up with a woman who was even worse in their situation. So those of you out there listening, I want you to realize that when you get your marriage straight, then everything else will fall in line too and come right into fruition. But we created the Hideout, Travis, and I haven't talked to you about it, but you guys out there listening too, we created this because every single highly successful person gets to a point where money and things isn't enough. And we wanted to be able to get people back in touch with the thing that really matters, which is the joy and the kid inside of all of us. And when that joy comes, then the celebration comes. And when that happens, then marriages start to go crazy, businesses start to go crazy. And this part of it has been absolutely amazing. But I love to hear your perspective on it, because again, being in the world and being in that world since I was in fourth grade, I see this challenge quite a bit. As it comes up, because I see the driven part of it, the things, and then I ask, like, when we get all the stuff and things, what's it about?
Yeah.
Right? What does it come down to? Right? Because I've never seen, like, for me, and this is just my own standpoint, is I've never seen ever in my life, I've never seen stuff and things fix the joy. I've seen joy fix the stuff and things. Does that make sense? So I think that it's great. I mean, to your point, I mean, I think it's amazing to be able to have that type of communication, that open communication, right? At this point too, because I know we're close, but I want to ask you too, as a founder and CEO, right? Most of the time the ego is so high that the ability to shift goes away. And you are a master at this. You saw something in your business, in guestio.com, and you shifted the whole paradigm. Like, help us to understand where you got that strength and talk to CEOs and founders out there and people who are possibly going to be that it's okay to shift because you shifted your company and like that was the deciding factor because you took your ego out of it and said, what do I really need to be able to deliver to my people?
Yeah, first of all, I would say it's understanding that this is completely normal. A pivot, a shift, whatever you want to call it, is totally, totally not even just normal. It should be expected if you're a founder. If there's a really great book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries that if you haven't read, you should read no matter what company. That's kind of more toward tech founders. But I wish I would have read it earlier before I even had a tech company because the principles are good regardless. And after I read that book, it was just a game changer in the way that I perceived our timeline to success. Because in kind of the direct response marketing world where I'm from, it's like, if you don't have success in 30 days, you're a failure. You know what I mean? But in the tech world, it's often where people will get a $3 or $4 or $5 million seed round, and then the idea never takes off. They spend all this time, energy, money, 2-3 years. And then what ends up taking off is when they switch the idea completely. Yeah, you have to fact check me on this. I forget which company it was completely, but I'm like 90% sure it was Slack. And Slack is like a $30 billion company, or Salesforce just acquired them or something for 30 billion, like some
Somewhere
deca
in there.
billion dollar tech startup. I want to say it was them. Again, you'll have to Google it to make sure. I want to say it was them, where like when they started their company, it had nothing to do with messaging and team communication, which is what Slack is if you're not familiar with it. It was a completely different service or SaaS product that they were initially doing. But what happened was they couldn't find any good team communication software. So they built their own internal team communication software just to communicate with their team inside of their own business. And that literally became the product that they started selling to other people, because they started realizing that the customers that they were talking to had that specific need. They pivoted the entire business in a completely different direction. And now Slack's a multi-deca billion dollar company. And so I think pivots and stuff like that are like your ego. You cannot let your ego be a part of the decision. You have to let the market be the decision maker. The market decides whether or not your product or service or the thing that you're trying to sell is actually worth anything. And they're going to vote not with a survey, not with a wait list, not with a form. They're going to vote with their wallet. They're going to vote with their credit cards, with their dollar bills. If you have customers voting with dollar bills, then follow the money. And that's what happened with us. Is like we started with the initial idea of like, hey, we want to start a marketplace of guests, kind of like Cameo, where podcasters can go and they can book a guest for their show, pay $1,000, they can get a really great guest on their show tomorrow, instead of having to go through cold reach out methods and wait a year and a half or never get them on. And we started and we pushed that idea for like 6, 8, 9 months. And then we started realizing that we had turned on the opposite side of the marketplace just because it made sense. We were collecting the data anyway on like the shows that were coming in to book the guests. So we were like, oh, let's turn on the show marketplace too, where people can book, pitch themselves to try to get booked on a show. And then we started looking at the data and we realized that the only people that were actually paying us subscriptions were people that were trying to get themselves booked on shows. Nobody that was trying to get a guest booked on their show. And so at that point, it was like, well, why are we being so resistant to this change where people are actually willing to fork out money for it? Let's just lean into solving that problem, even though that was not the problem that I intended to solve when we initially started out. And in fact, it was one that I was trying to stay away from. But at some point, it was like, well, what am I doing this business for? To satisfy my own internal desire, to prove that I was right with my original idea? Or am I doing this business to make money and like provide for my family and pay my employees well? Like, you know what I mean? What are you doing the business for? If you're not willing to pivot or shift at that point, you're making a decision that impacts not just you, but like the future of your company, the employees that you're working with, your customer base. Be willing to shift and pivot based on where the market decides the majority of your value exists.
Travis, I applaud you, because most of the time, especially ego, like CEOs and founders, the ego is so high that they'll stick to it. So I started the whole podcast because of my kids. My son is 10. His name is Maddox. He's a cartoon character. My daughter is 13 years old. Her name is McKenna. She's the biggest heart in the entire world. I started the podcast because I wanted to take iconic people like yourself, and I wanted to show my kids that it wasn't about your aptitude. It wasn't about your techniques. It was about your attitude that you took into life and the hard work that you put behind it. So what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both of their names, it would be amazing.
Maddox and McKenna, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, keep listening to what your dad's telling you to do. I know your dad's heart in this is to bring in a bunch of really great people to give you guys advice, but you got a wealth of knowledge in him. And if there's one thing that I think all kids have in common, it's that they tend to discredit the advice of their parents just because it's their parents, and they'll listen to all the other people that their parents talk to that they have respect for, but not their parents. And so listen to your dad, because he's got a wealth of knowledge, and he's putting you guys on the right track, just like it sounds like the track that he got put on. So stay on the right track, keep a positive attitude and mentality, and focus on building your mindset and your skill sets over the next 15 to 20 years. If you can in your teenage years and in your 20s, you can learn and build skill sets and have a good attitude about what you're working on, then that's where you can really earn in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, is if you learn in your teens and your 20s. So
Travis, you have been absolutely phenomenal. For all of you out there listening, you understand, I use this phrase all the time, success leaves clues. That's why we did the audiobook that just dropped, Success Leaves Clues, because I study and I've taken my whole entire life and I've dedicated it to studying people like Travis. And when you listen to the audiobook, you're going to see that all of the 7 Ps that we talk about that could shift your reality, Travis embodies. He does it, and he may it's amazing, Travis, because when you become aware of them, and I'll send it out to you. I want to send it out to you because when you listen, you'll be like, that's me, that's me, that's me, and it's amazing to be able to see the blueprint. The other thing that I hit on, guys, while you're listening out there, is the hideout. I spoke in front of a financial convention just recently, and I said it was in front of insurance, and people were talking a lot about life insurance, different type of insurances. I said, what if I could sell you an insurance policy that would save you 50% of your net worth and 30% of your income in perpetuity? Everyone raised their hand. They said, I'm in. I said, then stay married. And all of them looked at me. They said, is it that simple? I said, yes, it's that simple, but we've got to be able to find that joy. And that's what the hideout is about. And so that's going to be on the website. You guys could check that out, but it's coming. It's going to be in Park City, and it's going to be in Carlsbad. It's a place where we could get back in touch with the thing that really matters, which is the kid in all of us. So Travis, I tell you, you have been absolutely phenomenal. Dropped bombs. I can't wait for you to listen to this because you're going to hear yourself on a completely different level, man. But I appreciate you being on the show. You are absolutely phenomenal. And I'm going to force you to be my friend for the rest of your life.
Thanks for having me on, Kelly. It was a lot of fun, dude.
You're officially off the hot seat, man.